People don't change, they reveal themselves. You were taught to believe that loyalty is built slowly, that time, shared experiences, and spoken promises create something solid. That belief is your first error. Time does not create loyalty. It only delays exposure. Pressure is what reveals truth. When circumstances shift, when something valuable is introduced or something is threatened, people do not become different, they become visible. The friend who betrayed you did not transform in that moment. They were simply presented with a situation where pretending was no longer necessary. This is the world as it actually operates, not the version you were taught to accept. It is not governed by loyalty, but by self-interest, not by honesty, but by calculated appearances. Every relationship you hold in high regard exists under conditions, whether you acknowledge them or not. Respect is temporary and often transactional. Loyalty lasts only as long as it remains beneficial. And trust, in many cases, is nothing more than a delayed recognition of reality. You have been conditioned to fear enemies. That is a miscalculation. An enemy, once identified, is stable. Their position is clear. Their intentions, while not always visible in detail, are aligned with opposition. This makes them predictable. But a friend operates differently. A friend can agree with you, support you, and remain close to you, while quietly evaluating their own advantage. Their alignment is not fixed, it shifts with opportunity. The real danger is not open opposition, it is concealed self-interest. This is where most people fail without realizing it. They evaluate others emotionally instead of strategically. They trust based on familiarity rather than evidence. They believe what is comfortable instead of what is accurate. They interpret behavior through hope instead of observation. And because of this, they remain exposed in environments that reward awareness and punish assumption. That is why they never advance beyond a certain point. Welcome to the 1%. This is not a place where illusions are preserved. It is where they are dismantled. Human behavior is not softened here. It is examined without emotion or bias. Power is not treated as something abstract or distant. It is observed in its raw form. Influence is not misunderstood as popularity or approval. It is recognized as control over perception and outcome. Strategy is not optional. It is the foundation of survival in any competitive environment. You are not here for reassurance. You are here for clarity. You will learn to identify false loyalty before it creates loss. You will learn to interpret behavior based on incentives, not statements. You will learn to convert betrayal into usable information and information into strategic advantage. Because those who operate above the majority do not react impulsively to what happens around them. They understand the structure beneath it. They see patterns. They anticipate outcomes. They adjust before others are aware there is anything to adjust to. If this perspective creates discomfort, that is expected. Discomfort is a byproduct of removing illusions. Most people avoid it, which is why they remain predictable and easy to read. What follows will not reinforce what you already believe. It will challenge it. It will expose the assumptions you rely on. and it will force you to confront a version of reality that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. Once you recognize it, you will not return to the way you used to think. You are surrounded by people you believe you understand. You are wrong. What you call loyalty is often convenience wearing a polite mask. It exists only as long as it is easy, beneficial, and safe. The moment pressure is applied, real pressure, not discomfort, but risk, that loyalty begins to fracture. Watch closely. When success enters your life, some will celebrate you, but others will measure themselves against you. And in that comparison, something shifts. Admiration becomes quiet resentment. Support becomes silent competition. They will not announce this change. They will disguise it, but it is there. And when opportunity appears, an opening where your position, your trust, or your vulnerability can be used, they will act. Not because they changed, but because they no longer need to pretend. This is the part most people refuse to accept. The betrayal was not sudden, it was delayed. The disloyalty was not created, it was revealed. Now, consider your enemies. They do not hide their position. They oppose you directly, or at least consistently. Their intentions are rarely disguised beyond basic strategy. They do not rely on your trust. They simply act in alignment with their interests. And that makes them stable. You fear the wrong people. The friend who smiles without pressure is untested. The enemy who opposes you has already declared their position. One is uncertain, the other is defined. So ask yourself carefully, who around you has actually been tested and who has only been convenient? Human behavior is not complicated. It is simply uncomfortable to accept. Every decision, every alliance, every act of loyalty is filtered through one question: what serves me best? Not what is right, not what is fair, what is useful. Self-interest is not an exception in human nature. It is its foundation. People will appear loyal when loyalty benefits them, when it gives them access, security, identity, or emotional comfort. But remove these benefits or introduce a greater one elsewhere, and their position adjusts accordingly. This is why emotional loyalty is unstable. Emotion is reactive. It shifts with circumstance. It weakens under fear, temptation, and comparison. A person may feel loyal today and feel justified in betraying you tomorrow without ever believing they are inconsistent. Because they are not loyal to you, they are loyal to what you represent in their life. Change the value, and you change their behavior. Enemies, however, operate differently. They are not bound by emotional attachment. Their position is defined by opposition, and opposition, once established, tends to remain consistent because it is rooted in incentives. They do not need to pretend. They do not need to reassure you. They simply act, and that makes them predictable. Now, understand the deeper layer: power. In any social structure, power belongs to the individual who sees clearly, not the one who trusts deeply, not the one who feels strongly, the one who understands motives. If you misread motives, you misplace trust. If you misplace trust, you create vulnerability. And vulnerability in the presence of self-interest will always be exploited. Not sometimes, always.
Those who understand this do not move the way you move. They do not trust blindly. They do not rely on words. They do not confuse proximity with loyalty. They observe. A friend is not measured by what they say when things are stable. They are measured by what they do when something is at stake. Access, status, money, recognition. Introduce any of these and behavior becomes honest. So they wait. They create situations where incentives are visible, where choices must be made, where alignment cannot be faked. And then they watch. Because information is more valuable than comfort. Now consider enemies. Most people waste energy resisting them emotionally. Anger, frustration, fear. This is inefficient. An enemy is a source of data. They reveal how you are perceived. They expose your weaknesses. They test your reactions. And most importantly, they behave in patterns. Patterns can be studied. Studied patterns can be anticipated. Anticipation creates control. This is where advantage is built. You do not need your enemy to like you. You need them to be predictable. Control is not gained by eliminating opposition. It is gained by understanding it. And once you understand it, you can position yourself accordingly. Imagine this. You build something slowly, carefully, a reputation, a project, a position. And beside you is someone who has been there from the beginning. They support you, encourage you, agree with your decisions. They appear aligned. You trust them. Then the opportunity arrives. A promotion, recognition, access to something that only one of you can have. Now watch what happens. They hesitate, but only briefly. They justify, but only internally. And then they act. Information you shared becomes leverage. Access you granted becomes a pathway. Trust you offered becomes a weakness. And when it is done, they will explain it. They will rationalize it. They may even believe their own explanation. But the truth is simple. They did not betray you because they changed. They acted because the incentive outweighed the cost of pretending. Now consider your enemy in the same scenario. They never pretended to support you. They competed openly from a known distance. You expected resistance. You prepared for it. Their actions, while hostile, followed a pattern. They tried to block you. They tried to outmaneuver you. They acted in ways that were consistent with their position. And because of that, you were not surprised. You were prepared. The friend created damage through access. The enemy created resistance through opposition. One was hidden, the other was visible. Which one had more impact?
Here is the contradiction most people cannot accept. The more you rely on loyalty, the more exposed you become. Because loyalty, as most people understand it, is an assumption, not a guarantee. And building your decisions on assumptions is a structural weakness. You want to believe in stable relationships. You want to believe in permanent trust. You want to believe that shared history creates protection. It does not. History creates familiarity. Familiarity creates comfort. Comfort lowers awareness. And lowered awareness is where exposure begins. Those who rise to positions of power do not depend on friendship, not because they reject it, but because they understand its limits. They separate emotion from strategy. They can value a person and still measure them. They can work with someone and still prepare for misalignment. They can accept support without becoming dependent on it, because dependence removes control. And control, not loyalty, is what protects position. This is why those at the top often appear distant, not cold without reason, but controlled by design. They do not assume alignment, they verify it continuously. And the moment alignment shifts, so does their strategy.
Practical strategy. If you intend to operate differently, your behavior must change, not emotionally, structurally. First, trust actions, never words. Words are tools. They are used to influence perception. Actions, however, require cost, and cost reveals priority. Watch what people do when something is at stake. That is their truth. Second, maintain distance even with allies. Proximity creates exposure. The more access someone has to your plans, your weaknesses, your thinking, the more they can use, intentionally or not. Distance is not rejection, it is control. Third, study your enemies. Do not ignore them. Do not react emotionally to them. Observe them, their patterns, their timing, their methods. They will reveal more about reality than your friends ever will. Fourth, never depend on loyalty where self-interest is involved. If a situation creates incentive for someone to act against you, assume they will consider it. Plan accordingly. Structure your position so that betrayal is either difficult or irrelevant. Fifth, separate perception from reality. Just because someone appears supportive does not mean they are aligned. Just because someone opposes you does not mean they are dangerous. Evaluate based on behavior, not feeling. This is the difference between those who react and those who anticipate. And anticipation is where advantage lives. But even this understanding is incomplete. Knowing that people reveal themselves is only the first layer. Recognizing the patterns of friends and enemies is only the beginning. Because the highest level of control does not come from observing behavior. It comes from influencing it before it happens. From positioning people, both allies and enemies, into roles where their self-interest serves your outcome, whether they intend it or not. Most never reach this level, not because it is hidden, but because it requires a kind of clarity they are unwilling to develop. And what that level reveals about power is something few are prepared to face. That is where this begins to change completely. You've seen enough now to recognize the pattern, whether you are willing to admit it or not. What once appeared stable begins to look conditional. What once felt certain now reveals a structure beneath it. And once that structure is visible, it cannot be ignored without consequence.
Trust is fragile by design. It holds only within conditions where it is not truly tested. Introduce pressure and it begins to bend. Introduce temptation and it begins to shift. Remove benefit and it disappears entirely. Opposition, however, does not rely on illusion. It does not need to maintain appearance. It reveals itself through action, through resistance, through consistency over time. And power belongs to the individual who understands the difference. Not the one who expects loyalty to remain fixed, not the one who interprets behavior through comfort, but the one who sees actions as they are, calculated, self-serving, and aligned with incentive. Most people will reject this understanding, not because it is inaccurate, but because it removes something they rely on. It removes the illusion that relationships are stable without maintenance. It removes the belief that trust is permanent. And without those illusions, they are forced to confront how exposed they have always been. So, they choose comfort. They choose to believe in loyalty, even when it has not been tested. They choose to defend relationships that operate against their interests. They choose familiarity over accuracy, because accuracy requires separation. And separation is something they avoid, because distance forces observation, and observation removes illusion. So they remain in place, predictable in their thinking, transparent in their behavior, and easy to anticipate. Not because they lack intelligence, but because they refuse to see clearly. But you have already moved beyond that point. You have begun to notice what others overlook. You have started to interpret behavior without needing it to feel comfortable. You are no longer relying entirely on what is said. You are observing what is done, and more importantly, when it is done. That shift alone creates separation, not visible to most, but significant in outcome. What you do with that awareness determines whether it becomes advantage or remains unused, because awareness without application changes nothing. It only creates tension between what you see and how you act.
And there is more beneath this. More patterns that operate without being acknowledged. More structures that shape behavior long before decisions are made. Layers of influence that most people never recognize, even as they are affected by them directly. This level of understanding is not distributed openly. It does not appeal to those seeking reassurance. It is recognized only by those who value clarity over comfort and who are willing to act on what they see without hesitation. If you understand what has been outlined here, then the next step does not need to be explained, because access to this level of perception is never offered freely. It is taken quietly, deliberately, and without announcement. And once you begin to see people without illusion, something becomes unavoidable. In the end, it is not your enemies who create the greatest damage, but the trust you extended without ever verifying its cost.